Study. It is a word that God gave me a long time ago, and it keeps coming up. So I was like, you know what? Let me do a Bible study on this because I truly believe that when God elevates you, people will not be able to recognize you. Now, when He first gave me this word, I was thinking more along the lines of um, just like the outer appearance. Like people won't be able to recognize you in that way. But I think that we get so caught up in the outer appearance, not knowing that God works on the inside, and when He works on the inside, people are able to see that outside, the light on the outside. And so I was studying Genesis chapter 37, and it's the story of Joseph and his brothers, which is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Y'all have to excuse me because I'm out here on my porch and it's been raining. But the story of Joseph is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I absolutely love it. And there's so many hidden gems in that story. There's so many hidden gems in the Bible, period. But I love that story because I noticed it as I was studying. So in the beginning, in Genesis chapter 37, it says, and I was like, wait a minute, you have to read the full story to like get all the richness from it. But I'm going to try to break down to you what I saw when I read this story, and it's just so good. And it's not just for us to read it and to just see what God did for Joseph, but it's a picture. Hey, Star, it's a picture of what God can do for us too. So I'm always reading the Bible with my eyes, with my spiritual eyes, and not necessarily my physical eyes. I'm trying to see it with my heart, and I think that's what God wants us to do. But I read this story and I was like, man, this is so good, because when God elevates us, people won't be able to recognize us. And this is not something I'm just saying, this is here literally in the Bible. When God elevates you, people will not be able to recognize you. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm just going to show you in the Bible where this is, and I'm going to tell you the implications from it and what we have to do to make sure that we get the blessings and all the things that God has for us when He elevates us. So in Genesis chapter 37, verse 18, because I wanted to talk about this because a lot of times when we talk about Joseph's story, we talk about all the things that happened to him. And those things happened to him for a reason. And so in Genesis 37, verse 18, it says, when Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. And so I've done a video on this once before, you know, about not telling people your dreams, because that is the basis of this story, is that Joseph had a dream that God gave him, and his brothers hated him because of his dreams. And I've said this, people will hate you because you have dreams and ambitions. And I don't know why it's like that, but hey, it is what it is. But people will literally hate you just because you have a dream. Dream doesn't even have to come to pass. And you can literally learn that from reading this story. His dream hadn't even come to pass, but they didn't like their position, the position that they were in his dream, which means, and when Joseph tells the dream, he's kind of bragging about it or boasting about it. And so it's kind of like, oh, because they even tell him, oh, you think you will reign over us. So if they kill Joseph, then they kill his dream. The dream doesn't come to pass. And so you got to think about that every day. We are coming in contact, and a lot of times, you know, a lot of people don't realize this, is that the people that are most familiar with us and closest to us, usually are the people that kill our dreams, which is why I understand nowadays why God will told Abraham to get away from his family, you know. And it doesn't necessarily mean that all family is bad, but it doesn't mean that all family is good either. I mean, we're in the real world. Like, people are, sometimes your family can be, you know, your enemies as well. And so this is the part that trips me out, is because Joseph was young. They recognized him from a distance. They recognized him from a distance, y'all. And so that's the part that I focused on. But when you go to chapter 42, and I need y'all to catch this. I need y'all to catch this, because in one chapter of your life, people are not going to be able to recognize you. But in the chapter where God elevates you and brings you higher, you won't be recognizable. So if you go to chapter 42, I just read verse 37, Genesis 37, verse 18. Genesis means beginning. If somebody didn't know that, Genesis means beginning. So in Genesis chapter 42, verse 7 through 8, it says, Joseph recognized his brothers instantly, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where are you from? He demanded. From the land of Canaan, they replied. We have come to buy food. And then this is the verse right here, verse 8. It says, although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Oh, hey, G. Yes. I try to upload it after I'm done every time, but y'all, I don't know what happens with YouTube. Sometimes they upload, sometimes it doesn't, but I will try my best to make sure it uploads. But going back to verse 37, verse 18, if somebody could put that in the chat for me, put it in the chat. Verse 37, verse 18, Genesis 37, verse 18. I want to read it again. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. That was in verse 37, verse 18. So you go to chapter 42. Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize him. And I'm like, wait a minute now. You mean to tell me that they are this close up on Joseph? Come on now, y'all. Come on, somebody. They are that close up on Joseph and they don't recognize him. But in chapter 37, they recognized him from a distance. They recognized him from a distance. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. God, what you trying to say? And here's the thing. He was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery. And he also was falsely imprisoned. And y'all might be wondering, okay, well, what this got to do with anything? These are all the things that he went through. He was at a low point in life. Like, we can be, being thrown in a pit, when we're studying that's a metaphor for us, meaning we can be low in life, somewhere low in life. Our marriage can be in a low place. We can be in a low place financially. We can be in a low place mentally, emotionally, all those things. Your marriage can be in a low place metaphorically. So when you're reading that, but think about all the things that you've been through in life, and you're wondering, okay, because sometimes I wonder, okay, well, why am I going through these things? Why do I have to go through this? And I'm pretty sure Joseph probably was thinking the same thing, like, why am I experiencing all these things? But he went through all those things for a reason. And of course, you don't learn that until you get to the end of the chapter. The whole point of God giving him that vision and dream is so that he could go ahead of his family to save them from a famine that was coming. And so I think about that all the time, something that my pastor said, that, you know, we see to the corner, but God sees around the corner. We see the hill, but God sees over the hill. And if you study the Bible, even just throughout the beginning, all through the Bible, it's like God has to always send someone ahead. Even when the Israelites were freed from Egypt, God sent a pillar of cloud. Something was ahead of them in Exodus. So even with David, someone had to go ahead of him. So Joseph was the one who had to go ahead of his family so that he could save his family. So he didn't go through all those things for nothing. So what that looks like for me and you, like when you're experiencing all the things that you're going through, you have to look at it as, I'm not going through these things for nothing. And I know that's easier said than done, you know, because when we're in it, when we're in the storm, when we're going through these things, we tend to get a bit, you know, self-focused and be like, okay, well, why do I have to go through this? Why am I experiencing these things? But I want to give, you know, encouragement to anybody that may be going through anything. Is that if you read the story of Joseph, it says that God was with him all the time. And that speaks to the elevation of Joseph and the light that he was, because the people around him knew he was a light. Hey, yes, this is my favorite story. I've read it so many times, and I love this about you know, people not being able to recognize. So if they weren't able to recognize Joseph, that means, what that's telling me, God is saying to me and you, that people are not going to be able to recognize us. But I want to not focus on the outer. I want to think about the inner, like your integrity. Like when God elevates you, you know, it's about him not only changing what's on the outside, but what's on the inside. And so a lot of people, when they read Joseph's story, they don't realize that God blessed him because he was a man of character. He had integrity. And I remember seeing this, and it's not in the story, and people miss this, but I was studying. This is why we have to stay in the word. It's not in Genesis 37 through 50 where Joseph's story is. It's in Psalms 105 verse 19. And it really gives us a picture of why Joseph went through, well, it gives us one of the reasons why he went through a lot of the things that he went through. But if you read Psalms 105 verse 19, it says, until the time came to fulfill his dreams, the Lord tested Joseph's character. So all along, Joseph's character was being tested when he was thrown into the pit, when he was sold into slavery, and when he was falsely imprisoned. His integrity, his character was being tested. And so if God tested Joseph's character, that means he's going to test our character too. And, you know, ultimately he passed the test. And in Genesis 42 verse 6, it says, since Joseph was governor of all Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was him his brothers came to. When they arrived, they bowed before him and their faces to the ground. So ultimately, they ended up doing exactly what they didn't want to do. They thought that they had pretty much killed Joseph. Well, not necessarily killed him, because they didn't kill him. They ended up selling him into slavery. But they thought they had gotten rid of him and then gotten rid of the dream. And so all of it was God's whole plan for him to save his family from a famine. And the verse that really kind of stuck with me, in Genesis 39 verse 3, it says that Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. So God was with Joseph the whole time, and if he was with Joseph the whole time, he's with us no matter what we're going through. And I know it may not feel like that, but God was with him, and so he's with us a lot of times when we're going through, you know, our storms and our problems. And so I just really love this story because I was like, this is so good. And again, when we read this story about Joseph, that means that, God placed a dream in Joseph's heart. And I'm pretty sure if you're watching this, God has placed something in your heart. And I know it may seem like, oh, it's never going to come to pass. And you probably feel like you're going through everything under the sun. Like, oh my goodness, like, when is it going to come? When is it going to happen? And that's the other thing about Joseph. Like, he was 17 when God gave him the dream, which represents spiritual maturity, or metaphor for spiritual maturity for us. And so a lot of times we don't want to hear that part, but these are the things that help you, because if you have to think about it, if God gave Joseph, or if that dream came to pass when he was 17 years old, he wouldn't have been able to handle it. So you have to think about, am I spiritually mature enough, or am I wise enough to handle what God has put in my heart right now? And so when I'm reading that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if God tested Joseph's character until the dream came to pass, that means he's going to be testing my character. He's going to be testing my integrity. And so the action there from that story, or the obedience, is to remain a person of character, remain a person who has integrity. People are going to see the light in you, just as they saw the light in Joseph, which is why he was put in charge of so many things. Is because they saw that God was with him, and people are going to see that. People will notice it. People are going to notice your light. The right people, the people that matter. Let me just say that, because sometimes a lot of people won't see it, and maybe it's not meant for those people to see the light in you. Y'all excuse my dog from barking. But anyways, it's Joseph is such a good story to read from beginning to end. I've read it several times, and it's just so much good information in there. I mean, I could go on and on, but that was the one thing that I recognized in that story, is that that was the revelation that God dropped in my spirit, is that when he elevates you, people will not be able to recognize you, and it's going to be the people that are most familiar with you, because those were Joseph's brothers. And it could maybe it may not be a brother, but maybe it's somebody who you felt like was a brother, a sister to you, or like family to you, because this was Joseph's family. And it goes to show that no matter what we go through, or all the things that we go through, God can be with us and go through those, as we go through those things, and we still come out not looking like, I should say, the things that we've been through. Because evidently he must have looked awfully good that they didn't recognize him. You know. But I thought that was a interesting take. I was like, man, they recognized him from a distance, but now they're close up on him, and they don't even recognize your own brother. And if y'all think about that, now if you were to see your siblings, oh yes, yes, I love that at the end. That's, I believe, in Genesis 50 verse 20. I love that, because they did intend it to hurt him. Yep, verse 20. Genesis 50 verse 20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. And so if you go back and read that and study what he said God intended it all for good. And I got to thinking, I was like, wait a minute. So, you know, I don't think God does things intentionally to harm us, but I do think he allows some things to happen. And I think he allowed Joseph to go through those things, and he allows us to go through go through some things. And if you even like take a think about Job, God did not cause all those things to happen to Job. He didn't do those things to Job, but he did allow it. And I remember reading, well, I remember thinking to myself one day, like, oh yes, all for his glory, all for his glory, and to save lives. Because that's the part he said, he brought me to this position so I could save the lives of people, because basically they were gonna starve to death, all of their family. And he tells them that, I forget which verse it's in, but he tells them that they need to come to Egypt where he is and live so that they won't starve to death. And then one of the other things that you can get from this story too is that our gifts are not for us, they're for other people. Because God gave him the vision, the dream, I should say. God gave him the dream. He was able to interpret dreams, but the dream or the gift that he had wasn't for him, it was for other people. It was for him to serve other people, and that's exactly what he did. So like I said, there are a lot of gems that are in this story, and that's one thing that we can learn from the story also, is just to serve. If we serve and we use our gifts like we're supposed to, which I think is the key to our breakthrough, is just serving. God gave me a word on that, but that's a different story for a different day. But Joseph served. And I don't think there's any way around the serving. And I also think there's no way around the suffering or the wilderness season where God prepares us. Because as the story mentions, Joseph was 17 when God gave him the dream. He wasn't necessarily prepared to handle where God was taking him. And so I think by him going through all those things, it was in preparation. And if you go back to that story, I pay attention to words. Like I pay attention to the words. When they threw him into, I think it's in Genesis 37. Let me go to Genesis 37. They threw him in the cistern. The cistern was in the wilderness. And I caught that. I was like, wait a minute now. And so I don't know if you all have ever listened to, I did a podcast episode on it. I've also explained it before, is that the wilderness, anytime you see the word wilderness in the Bible, it's a metaphor for a waiting period or a preparing period. And so in Joseph's case, it was both waiting and preparing, because that dream didn't come to pass right away. It took some time. And again, a lesson for us that sometimes when God gives you the dream, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come to pass right away. I know we wish it would, but you got to think about it. Going back to Joseph's story, 17, he lacked some maturity to handle the dream. I think I always pay attention to numbers, and I think the Bible is very good about using numbers, especially when it talks about age. Even if you go back and you think about Abraham's age is also a metaphor for spiritual maturity. God gave him his son at an old age. It also means that God can do anything at any time. It's never too late with him. So yeah. And so those numbers are in there for a reason. Again, even when God told Abraham he was going to have a child, that child didn't come right away. It took some time. Even for his son Isaac, when Isaac prayed for his wife Rebecca to have a child, I think it took about 20 years. I think it said that he was I want to say that he was 40 years old, and I think they didn't have Isaac until Jacob and Esau until 60. I have to go back and read it, y'all. But I know that it didn't happen right away. It took some time. And so when we're reading that, that's telling us, hey, God, yes, I've given you the dream, or yes, I've given you the vision, but it's going to take some time. And so the Bible talks about how we should wait, waiting patiently. I've talked about that before. It tells us how to wait, continue to work, be strong and courageous, wait patiently for the Lord. Like, everybody gotta wait. I just feel like, and I don't know why this is a thing with God, but that's just how he does things, And so sometimes I know that it can get hard waiting. Trust me, I know, y'all. I struggle with waiting myself. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, when, God, when? Even David, I think it was in Psalms 13. He was like, when, Lord, when? He asked, like, in the first 4 lines of that verse, like when you going to come through, God? Like, when you going to come through? He said, I'm squinting to see, So even he had a hard time waiting, because we know that he didn't become king right away when he was anointed. He went back to being a shepherd boy, And I know we get excited when God gives us the dream, or he puts whatever it is on his heart. I know I did. I got super excited. And I remember being super excited and telling somebody, the dream that God had put on my heart. And I'm telling you, it ruins it, because when people don't get excited for you like you think they should be excited for you, it makes you question, what God told you. And you have to remember that, when God gives you a message, or he gives you a vision or a dream, it's not for anybody else to understand. It's just for you and him. And so that was the mistake that Joseph made, was telling his family. Because when he told his family, when he told his brothers, they didn't really understand, the dream. They didn't understand even Joseph didn't really understand. He just thought that he was going to be, over them. Even his dad didn't like the position that he was in the dream. Like, you mean to tell me you going to reign over me and your mom? So if family can be that way about you telling you a dream, imagine what a friend might do, or someone you consider to be family. Sometimes strangers will be happier for you than your actually family. And I'm not just saying that. This is truth. This is reality. Even Jesus, in his ministry, said that a prophet is not honored in their own town. A lot of people could have been healed and had miraculous things to happen for them in their life, but they couldn't see. All they could see was a carpenter's son. And so it said that Jesus was only able to lay hands on a few and heal a few and perform only a few miracles. I'm paraphrasing y'all, but y'all know the story. Because they couldn't see. And a lot of times the people that are closest to us cannot see who we are gonna become, or who God wants us to be. All they can see is, you're the girl who, got married when you were 18, or you're the girl who had a baby when you were in high school, or you're the girl who, ran away from home, or you're the girl who, whatever the case may be, who lost her job. People will only see you as, the wrong people. That's why I said it's the right people will see you the way God wants you to see. And a lot of times it's just going to be strangers. That's just the way it is. I don't know why, but, and I was just thinking, I started this YouTube channel, and of course I got excited and I told my family and friends, but my family and friends are not the ones that come on YouTube and support me on this channel. Am I upset? No. At first, disappointed. And I was like, well, wow, but it is what it is, you know? And you have to keep going, and you have to just continue to do what God has told you to do, regardless of what it is. And I think that, you know, that going back and just thinking, you know, so many people can relate to that story, you know, in so many ways. Like, it's just so much information that's just so good in that story. But um what I'm holding on to is that word that God gave me, and I pray that this encourages somebody else, is that, you know, um when God elevates you and he gets done with you, they won't be able to recognize you. And I really think we won't even be able to recognize ourselves. Like, the old version will be gone. And we talked about that before, that spiritual transformation that happens. And so, you know, the name change, I don't know if y'all remember that when we talked about it, you know, the name changing is a sign of spiritual transformation. You know, Abraham's name changed, Abram from Abraham, Sarah to Sarah, you know, and Jacob to Israel, Simon to Peter. You know, it was about a transformation. It was about becoming, and we have to become a different version of ourselves. Um, the person that God intended us to be. And so it takes a lot to let go of the old version of ourselves. We're gonna fight, you're gonna run into some, and of course the enemy doesn't want you to change. He wants us to keep repeating the same cycles over and over again. And a lot of times people don't even realize that they're in a cycle. Like, they don't realize that, wait a minute, this is like nothing, I'm stuck. And I think it's a faith thing, you know, paralyzed by fear, paralyzed by, you know, the not knowing, all of those things, you know. But I think it all goes back to a faith thing, or maybe even just, you know, even fear how, you know, people may see you, fear how you're going to be perceived. All of these things I've dealt with. Like, oh, what are people going to think about me, you know, teaching the Bible, you know. I'm just being honest with y'all and transparent. Like, I've thought about all of those things, like, because it just didn't make sense for me. Like, you know, and there are going to be some things that just won't make sense. You know, we talked about strange plans last week. Yeah, God's plans don't have to make sense to anyone but him. But it's the obedience, you know. And sometimes obedience is not as easy as, you know, it's not it's not it's not easy all the time to be obedient, you know. Sometimes we know the thing to do, and it's like, I'll just even use myself as an example. Sometimes I know the thing to do, but it's like, okay, well, what if I were to do this, or what if I were to do that, you know. And it's like, and I think it's a lot of times the flesh wanting to do what's, you know, easier, or what's more comfortable for you. It's easier. And I know I talked about this with you, Maisha. I don't know if you're still on here. It's easier for me to write things out versus getting on camera like I am right now. Still feeling cringy, you know, every time I get on here. And I even got a little slight headache before I got on here, but I was like, you know what? I'm getting on today. You know, I told y'all last week that I would be here this week. And so unless something is just really wrong, I'm here, you know. And so, you know, you just have to keep it moving, you know, just keep going. And I just know that, you know, there's a blessing. yes, obedience is better than sacrifice. And it's so um I realized this in the beginning, that if it's comfortable, then it's probably not God. Because I could think of a lot of things that would be comfortable for me to do, and for a lot of people, if it's comfortable, then it's probably not God. And if you think about some of the people in the Bible, they were called to do things that weren't comfortable. They were put in compromising situations. They suffered, but it was for the good of God. And I just think to myself, even though some days it's challenging, I'm not going to say struggle, the word struggle is challenging. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And sometimes I just like, okay, I need rest. And I know God knows my heart, and he knows that I'm trying to do my best, and I'll get rest. And okay, girl, you done rested enough. Let's get to work. And so I remember, and I think I said this to y'all last week, and it rings in my, it's coming back to me now, that done is better than perfect. And we know that if you wait for the perfect time to do everything, nothing's ever going to happen. So you just have to do it. And what I have learned, that is, if you keep going and you keep doing, you just kind of, all the things that you thought were hard, or it gets better. You learn from it. And I think that sometimes this is a part that we want to skip. We want to skip the uncomfortableness of things. Like we don't want to feel uncomfortable. I know I don't want to feel uncomfortable. But even in my not wanting to feel uncomfortable, like, I still always push past it. It was uncomfortable for me to go to nursing school. I was so out of, and I've shared that with you all. I was so timid when I went to nursing. I was scared of everything. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna hurt somebody, blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? And that instructor noticed that, and she was like, she can't be working on nobody. She's scared to touch them. You know what I'm saying? I literally was scared to touch people my first time around in nursing school, y'all. I was so timid and so scared. Yes, I was so scared. And the second time around, because I shared with y'all that I failed that class because I failed the clinical, and they were like, you gotta take it back over. And so I ended up having to just start school all the way back over, because I moved back here to Alabama, and I had to get myself all the way together. I was like, girl, you got to get yourself together. Was I afraid? Yes. Was I still a little timid? Yes. But I kept showing up, and like I faked it till I made it. I was like, I'm confident I'm gonna do it. You know what I'm saying? Same thing when I got my first nursing job. Like, you have people's lives in your hands. You're gonna be a little bit nervous. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just, you just gotta I just keep going. We just got to keep going. So if there's something that makes you feel uncomfortable, just keep doing it. I don't think the uncomfortableness will ever go away, but I think that it does get better. It gets better. And I think you get a little bit more confident in what you're doing. Like, I'm confident as a nurse now. I'm very comfortable. Now, if I run into something that I haven't seen or done before, because, I've been a nurse for a long time, and, when you only work in a certain area, then, might, like, if I had to deliver a baby in a car or something like that, now that would make me nervous, because, one, I'm not a labor and delivery nurse. I've never delivered a baby, but hey, I did a clinical rotation on it. I'm pretty sure I would be of some help as a medical person. You know what I'm saying? You know, um, that's all I'm saying. But it's okay. But I love this word from Genesis, and if y'all get a chance, go back and study those two verses. The first one was Genesis 37 verse 18, and I think the second one was Genesis 42 verse 7 through 8. And that's it, y'all. They won't recognize you when God blows you up, when he elevates you. But think about the elevation from the inside, because I think when we get better on the inside, when the heart gets better, character gets better, integrity gets better, like, people, they can't deny the light that they see in you, and people will start to tell you there's something about you, they'll notice it. And I have people tell me that sometimes at work. There's one or two people in particular that have told me, but people will start to recognize that in you. And when you hear it, it makes you feel good, and it shows that, in thinking about it, it shows growth. Okay, I've grown. Yes. Yes. And I think it's almost like God tapping them on the shoulder, because sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves, and I may not feel like any different. I might feel a little different, but when somebody tells you that, it makes you feel good, and on several occasions, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. I know that was God, just, saying, hey, you're doing good, even though you think you may not be doing good, but you're doing good, And I don't limit myself just to, YouTube. I share the gospel everywhere. I don't care where I'm at. If I can share a word and give somebody some encouragement, I'm going to do that, whether I'm at work or if I'm at the grocery store or wherever, get my teeth cleaned or whatever, if the opportunity presents itself, and I feel like, the Holy Spirit gives me a prompting to share or to do that, then that's what I'm gonna do. It's easier for me to do that one-on-one versus to a camera, to a phone. Even though I know that somebody is on the other side, it's still not easy for me. And y'all will hear me say this again. So and I hope that encourages somebody, like, okay, well, she doesn't feel comfortable, then, maybe I can do this thing, or maybe I can. It doesn't necessarily have to be camera, but whatever it is that you're uncomfortable doing, that you feel, hey, I'm scared, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And I think you'll look back on, like, because time is gonna pass, you'll look back and you'll be like, okay, I'm glad I did that, every day. I'm like, and just taking it one day at a time and asking the Lord to help you. God, y'all remember, God give me success today. Remember Genesis 24 verse 12, Abraham's servant, God give me success today, whatever it is that you want me to do. And then also praying, God, let your will be done and not mine, every single day. Because I tell you, the flesh will want to do the total opposite. And so I kind of had gotten off of that the last week or so, and I was like, wait a minute, I got to start back praying that, God, let your will be done. I know what I want to do, but let your will be done in my life. And so that is it for this Bible study, y'all. I'm not going to hold y'all any longer. I'll be here again next week. And Star, I know you said you had a question for me. Remember, unapologeticfaithco@gmail.com. So send me an email. But that's it for this evening, y'all. I thank y'all for joining, and I will see y'all again next week. Y'all have a blessed day, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. I'll see y'all next week.